Welcome to Crack It. We are going to discuss in detail about the annotations in the Spring framework which we use in our daily coding life. This Spring Boot annotations video has part 1. Please go through the first part for the better understanding. You can see the link in the right corner of the screen. You can use that. Today we will discuss about the commonly used annotations with coding explanations to understand and answer the interview questions really well. So our series mainly focuses on the interview questions and has series for Java and Java 8 interview questions playlist. You can go through that if you want. We launched this channel new, so we request you to like, share and subscribe the videos if you really like the content. Let's start the discussion. Let's start with the auto-wired annotation today. To understand auto-wired annotation, we need to know what dependency injection is. So let's first see what dependency injection is, then we'll go and see what auto-wired annotation is. So, what is a dependency injection? Let's try to understand this dependency injection through an example before we see what is specified in the Spring doc. So, if you see this, I have two objects, object A and object B, and object A is dependent on object B. Assume my object A as an employee class, and in employee class, I have a data member which is of type B, that is address. So, I have a class employee, inside that I have a member which is address, that is of type B. So, my employee class is now dependent on this address class. So, in my employee class, how do I need to provide this address object? So, I need to provide that dependency, that address dependency through constructor arguments. I can provide it as a constructor argument, or I can provide it as an argument to a method, or I can provide it as in the properties. We'll see with the coding example on how we are injecting it as a constructor argument or through a method or through the properties. So, when will we inject this dependency to class A? After it is created, after it is returned from the factory method. Who will inject it? The container will inject it. Which container? Spring container. So, there's no need for us to write code for that. Instead, the Spring container will create the bean object B, and after once it is created, it will keep it in its container, and during the instantiation or creation of the object A, Spring container will inject this object B, and this is called as dependency injection. Injecting the dependency B to the object A. We are now clear on what dependency injection is. Let's see what this auto-wired annotation does. So, I know the concept of dependency injection, then how can I use it in the Spring framework? To use this or to enable this dependency injection into the Spring framework, we need to use this auto-wired annotation. So, this auto-wired annotation, that is allowing the Spring to inject the dependencies into the class so that we don't need to manually configure anything. So, in our example, Spring will automatically inject the address class to the employee class. There is no need for us to configure anything in the employee class for the address configuration. That is called as auto-wired. So, what are the in which are the ways in which it can inject the dependencies? So, this annotation can be used to inject dependencies in fields, methods and constructors. Yes, in the previous slide, in the dependency injection, we saw that those dependencies may be the constructor arguments or a method parameters or the properties. That's what is written here, fields, methods and constructors. So, why do we need auto-wired annotation? To enable dependency injection in my Spring framework. So, why do I need it? Basically, why do I need that dependency injection? So, this auto-wiring or the dependency injection, it is simplifying the process of managing the dependencies. There is no need for us to go configure anything manually. Instead, Spring will do everything to me. It is simplifying the process for the developers. Second, this supports loose coupling. What does it loose coupling mean? This loose coupling is nothing but the dependency between the two objects should be least extent practicable. So the dependency between the two objects should be very less. That is called as loose coupling, and this auto wiring supports that. Let's see the coding examples for this at auto wired annotation. We'll try to cover all these three types in our coding example. Let's go check the code now. So this is the Spring project that we created in the Spring concepts video. If you didn't have the code setup, please use this video for reference. Let's now see this example to understand how auto wiring and its type works. So we have a class here, Crackit, with ID, name and playlist as the properties. If you see here, we are auto wiring this playlist. If we match this with our example that we discussed, this is object A and this is object B, and my object A is dependent on my object B, and I'm using this at auto wired annotation. What will this do? Like after this playlist object has been created, Spring container will itself inject this dependency to this Crackit object and give it to me. Let's see this how it happens. So in my Crackit class, I have ID, name and playlist. I have getters and setters for it. Like I'm using Lombok annotations, and I have created the constructors with all arguments and no arguments, and I have like overridden equals and hash code and toString method. So let's go see what's in this playlist. In this playlist, I have a string with a playlist name. So how can we prove that this playlist will get injected to the Crackit when we create a bean? So what I have did is, like, I have created a Crackit beans with at configuration. So if you remember in our previous example, we have in a previous video, we have explained what at configuration is. There we clearly explained that if we have beans that is to be created and stored in the Spring container, then we need to provide this at configuration. And yes, here we have interbean dependencies, meaning this Crackit is dependent on playlist. Then I need to use at configuration and not at component. So to be very clear, if you're still having confusion, you can go and watch the previous video which we posted in our channel for better understanding. So here what I did is I've created a bean called Crackit with ID and name as properties. I've created a playlist bean with the playlist name as Spring interview questions. If you see here, I have created one more bean that is also for the playlist, and that name is Java playlist. Let's see what is there in the main class. I didn't do nothing big in the main class. From the application context, I'm getting this Crackit bean and I'm trying to print all the properties of the Crackit. So what will happen now? So overall what we did, we have a Crackit class, we have given an at auto wired for this playlist, and we are creating the bean Crackit and playlist, and we have given at configuration to inject these beans to my Spring container, and I am trying to get those beans, the Crackit bean, from the container or the application context, and I am printing those values here. Let's see what happens. So if you see here, I am getting Spring interview questions for the value get playlist.playlist name. Let's go see. Here if you see, I have given only Crackit's ID and name. ID and name. Yes, I have provided. ID is 1L and the name is Spring auto wired example. But how come this value playlist, Spring interview questions, got injected to this playlist? That is why, because I have given at auto wired. So if I give at auto wired, so the Spring container will search search for the playlist type while creating this object. It will go check whether it is able to find in the container of the playlist type. So it will go and check in the container. Yes, we have the type of playlist, but we have two beans here. What will happen? Like this Java playlist bean is also a playlist type and playlist is also a playlist type. What will happen? What will Spring container will do now? It will go check the name here. So if we check the name, that is playlist, so that playlist is matching with the name here. So it will pick this Spring interview questions and it will print that value for me. So Spring will inject this playlist dependency to my Crackit object and it will store it in the Spring. And if we print it, that's why we are getting all these values. Let's change this to get ID. By mistake, it seems like I have given get name twice. So I'll go to Crackit Beans now and I'll remove this name now, the bean name now. What will happen? So in the Spring container, I have two playlist beans, two beans of type playlist. Which bean will the Spring container pick up? Let's see. Let's run and see what happens. So if you see here, we are getting an exception. What exception we are getting? So it is not able to solve the dependency for the playlist, and it is saying that it is expecting a single bean, but it is finding two, get playlist and get playlist 1. So if there are two beans of the same type in the Spring container, and if we didn't define anything over there like by name or which is the primary one to use, then Spring will throw this exception. Let's now see how we can solve this exception, how we can resolve this exception. So I have two beans of same type in my Spring container. So I want to use one of my bean as the primary bean if multiple beans present in the container. So in our case, for the playlist type, we have two beans present in the container. So what will I do? I want this Java interview questions to be printed, like to be my playlist. If there are multiple beans of this type is present, I want this to be the primary one. So if I give just this annotation at primary and if I execute my program, let's see what happens. So if we see here, it has picked up the Java interview questions. So if you see here, it has picked up the Java interview questions and it is not throwing me any exception. Why it is not throwing me any exception? It is because I have given this bean as a primary. Even though it has multiple beans in the container, it will take this primary bean and it will set that value or inject that value to the Crackit object. So suppose I want, if I've given, if you remember, we have given the name of the beans previously as playlist, and here I've given it, I'll give it a like Java playlist. So even when we have like this, we didn't get exception. Even though I have two beans of the same type, I didn't get exception. And I saw that like the Spring interview questions is printing. Why? Because it is because my parameter name in the Crackit class is playlist, and it is trying to search with that name here, and that is why it is printing that Spring interview questions here. So to prove this, what I'm going to do is I'll just change my parameter name to Java playlist here, and I'll execute this program and see what happens. Oh, sorry. Since I'm using Lombok, the method name got changed. So if you see here, this has been changed to Java interview questions, which is nothing but it is picking up this bean. Why it is picking up this bean? Because I have changed my property name to Java playlist. So first what Spring is doing, it is auto wiring by name. So if you see here, this is auto wire by name. Previously what we saw, like, but by using at primary, we can define that which of the beans it needs to pick up if there is multiple beans of the same type. We are going to see one more annotation now, and that's at qualifier. So to understand at qualifier, I have added one more playlist, say Java 8 playlist here, and I have given this as my primary. Let's see what happens. So if I run this, I'll get Java 8 interview questions. Why? Because this is my primary playlist. So it will take value from here and it will print that value only. So this is now all clear, but I've all clear. I've created one more class here called Crackit1. It has the same properties as this playlist. So if you see here, like Crackit, if you see here, I have ID, name, and the same playlist here. So, but for this Crackit1, what I need is like I need to for this Crackit1 class, what playlist I want, I know. Always I want to print this Java playlist and not the other ones, even though the multiple beans is present. What do I need to do? So I need to provide at qualifier annotation here, and I need to give the name of this Java playlist here. If I give like this, and I'll go to my application and I'll create, so crackit1 dot class, I'll import it. So I'll give crackit1. So it has to pick up also crackit1. I'll print that value, and let's see what happens now. So if you see here, second one, this crackit1 is Java interview questions, but if you see here, like we have defined this as a primary, but is it picking that primary? No, it is not picking that primary, but it is picking the value that I have given here as a qualifier. So this is the difference between the at primary and at qualifier. So when this at primary will work, at primary, this will work if I have multiple beans of the same type, but it doesn't know which it needs to pick. In that situation, this bean will take priority and this will get assigned to the object, injected to the object. But in the case of at qualifier, we know which specific bean we need to inject to our class, so we can give the name of the bean by giving its name. Even though it has primary annotation or whatever it is there, it will not consider anything. It will go search for this. If it is present, it will pick it up. Let's see by changing this name to Java playlist 1. So if I change it, I can see that I'm getting a compilation issue saying that cannot find bean with qualifier Java playlist 1. What does that mean? In my configuration class, I don't have any bean with that name, so I cannot give it. With this, we covered what at auto-wired annotation is, what at qualifier annotation is, what at primary, what is the difference between at qualifier and at primary with coding examples. So we should be cleared by these annotations by this time. We have few other annotations to cover, like at controller, at service, at repository, at REST controller, at response body, at path variable. We'll cover that in our next video. We'll try to wrap up all the annotations in our next video. Stay tuned for the updates. Thanks for watching Crackit. Please support us with your likes, shares and subscriptions. Stay tuned for updates.